Hi everyone, thank you for coming out tonight. The layout of this room is a bit wonky. I do have some slides, and so if you can't see them super well, there's a URL you can go to, bit.ly/internal-things. And without further ado, let's jump into it. So this is the Netflix UI. Most of you are probably familiar with it because lots of people watch Netflix in the United States. But we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that today because we're talking about internal things. My question for you all is, how many of you have ever thought about what happens when you hit the play button on Netflix? Okay, not many of you. And that's totally fine. I hadn't thought about it until I joined the company, and then I learned some really fascinating stuff about it. So let's look at a high-level overview of what happens. If you hit that play button, it starts by your device, whether it's your TV, tablet, laptop, cell phone, whatever, starts by making a request to our CDN, or Content Delivery Network, which is called OpenConnect. OpenConnect is actually embedded in ISP centers around the world. And that's part of how we get our industry-leading performance for our video streaming. It's really fascinating, and I'd encourage you to check it out if that kind of...
Sorry. What kind of car is it? Does someone have a black Prius with an Uber sticker blocking in another car? No. Okay. Sorry.
No worries. Cool. So yes, we go to OpenConnect. Not all of the requests can get handled there, though. And so what happens after that is you hit this monstrosity. And so this is a visualization of what I like to call actually Netflix. And so this is a visualization of all of the microservices that actually make up Netflix's public API. At least it was as of one point in time. It's probably changed since then. It's kind of overwhelming though, right? Like there are so many nodes in this graph, you can't even read what any of the labels say. It's a lot. But what's even more surprising is all of this stuff is supported by a bunch of tools and other systems that aren't even visualized in this. And that is what I like to refer to as the internal things, the internal side of Netflix. And so I work on internal products. There are many engineers and developers out there at lots of companies, not just Netflix, but all big companies really, that work on these type of products, things that are sometimes one, maybe even more steps removed from the actual consumer experience that the business is developing and shipping. And so today, I want to talk about this because you don't hear a lot about them, but there are tons of developers that work on these type of things. And so we're going to cover some pretty basic stuff like what exactly makes a product an internal product, how they differ from consumer products, what are some of the unique challenges that face developers working on them, and how it changes your day-to-day, as well as some other stuff along the way. Now note, all of this that I'm going to share is kind of covered or colored by my time building internal tools, specifically at Netflix. So your mileage may vary. Some stuff that I say may not be applicable everywhere, but I hope to present a relatively generic picture of what it's like to work on internal tools, and not just something that's super Netflix specific, because I personally don't think that would be very useful to you all, unless you wind up working there. So with all that said, who am I? Why should I be talking to you about this? My name is Trent Willis, and I am a senior UI engineer on the Insight engineering team at Netflix. And since I want to talk about internal tools and what they're like, it might help you to provide a little bit of context about what my team is, what it is that we do for the company. And so, Insight engineering is one of many internal teams at the company. And our goal, simply put, is to enable real-time operational insights for Netflix engineers. Now, the problem domain that we work on, real-time operational insights, is, in my opinion, really fascinating. And it's a really cool problem domain, but it's not the primary thing that I want to talk about in regards to this statement. I think this statement does a really fantastic job of highlighting how an internal product differs from a consumer or external product. And that is, they exist to enable something for engineers or employees of a specific company. And this work is not always glamorous, right? When a lot of people think about or dream about being a web developer at a successful company, they're like, I want to work on the consumer-facing product. I want my work to be seen by millions of people, used across entire industries. And that's not the type of work that I do, which is unfortunate. It would be awesome if all those people were able to see all the cool stuff that we build, but that's just not the reality of the role. But that said, I think it is a really rewarding and important area of web development, and that's why I want to talk about it. And so let's start by talking about why that is. How is it rewarding and important, and what makes it different from working on other types of products? The most notable reason, and the one that I'm most passionate about, is you get to improve the day-to-day experience for others. And those others are your coworkers, people that you get to sit next to, that you see at lunch, that you talk to by the water cooler, or what have you. They do work that you're building tools to enable. You get a chance to build products that directly impact them and make their day-to-day work better. And that, in my opinion, is really awesome. Prior to working at Netflix, I worked on consumer products, and it was a lot of fun. But I never got to actually talk to real users of the things that I built. Right? If you're working on a product, chances are you don't use that product, or if you do use it, your perception is colored by your intimate knowledge of what it is like to work on that. Here, I sit next to the people that I'm building for. They come up and talk to me about the new features that I shipped. Most of the time, it's like, hey, thank you for shipping that, or thank you for helping me enable this new workflow that I needed. Sometimes it's, hey, you broke this, please fix it. But hopefully, the positives outweigh the negatives. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. The second big reason why I think that this is really important is you're building a foundation for others to succeed. And not just your coworkers directly that are using it, but for your whole company, really. A lot of internal products play a really integral part of company successes. For instance, think about Netflix. When we launch a new season of a really popular series like Stranger Things, we get a huge surge in traffic usually, especially within the first 24 hours. If we didn't have the robust internal tooling and architecture that we have in place to handle and automatically scale up our services, it would prove to be a really bad experience for our users. A good anecdotal example of that would be if you tried to play Pokemon Go when it was first launched. It was bad. And so you get to build a foundation to help your team, your company succeed and even exceed their expectations of what they're able to do. And then finally, you get to create something different. When I tell people that I'm a web developer, most of the time they're like, I don't really know what that means. Or if they do, they think, oh, okay, that means you build stuff like Facebook or Twitter, or maybe a news site like the New York Times, or maybe an e-commerce thing like Amazon. But there's so much more out there in the world of web development, right? It's a really vast field, and it covers everything from this type of stuff that I just mentioned, all the way to productivity reports, dashboarding software, business analytics tools, all kinds of stuff. And some of these tools are really important to a certain subset of people, right? There are people in business roles all around the world that spend hours and hours a day probably looking at some application that is probably a web app. And if you're doing your job well, you get to make their job a little less hard and make it a little more enjoyable for them. And so, because of that, you also wind up getting to approach some interesting problems, right? You get to tackle things that a lot of folks don't see, problem domains and problem spaces that you may not think about. So that, in a brief nutshell, is why I enjoy working on internal applications. And now, as a brief example of one of those, I want to talk about an app called Lumen. So Lumen is a self-service dashboarding application that I work on at Netflix. It's the primary project I work on. You can read more about it at this blog post at bit.ly/Netflix-Lumen. And it's a cool project. But oftentimes when I tell people it's a self-service dashboarding application, they're like, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to me. And so I like to tell a story. Imagine you're watching Netflix. You get home after a long day of work, plop down on the couch, maybe you have a snack, and you're like, yes, let's get to watching a new episode of my favorite show. And you go to click the play button, and you get hit with the buffering screen. Or maybe even nothing happens. You try it a few more times, and eventually you get frustrated. Like, oh my gosh, all I want to do is watch TV. So maybe you're an engineer, and you're like, okay, it's probably my internet service provider. And so maybe you go to a site like fast.com, which is actually maintained by Netflix, and say, oh, okay, my internet speeds seem fine. Note that 9 megabits per second is fine when you're in an airport, but hopefully you have better speeds than that at home. And so your internet's fine. So that means there's something else is the issue. So meanwhile, over in the Netflix cloud, we have systems that are detecting that something is wrong. People are having issues watching their Netflix. And so my team's systems detect that problem, and we go and alert our senior site reliability engineers and say, hey, you need to find out what's wrong and go ping the right people to fix it. They start investigating, and hopefully they're able to quickly find the problem. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes we can't automatically detect what went wrong. And in those cases, they might wind up at a screen that looks like this. So this is a screenshot from Lumen. Lumen is a dashboard that visualizes all kinds of important data to Netflix. That ranges anywhere from user sessions, number of user sessions that are going on a given time, how many people are starting a new stream right now, all the way to things like, how many errors is a specific service having somewhere in that massive diagram I showed earlier. So it's really important for our engineers to help them debug and fix those issues, identify where stuff started going wrong. So that's where this product fits into the Netflix ecosystem. What makes it interesting, though, is that when I tell this story to people, it starts to click a lot more. They're like, oh, okay, I see why that's valuable. And so that's one of my first things that I want you all to take away. And that is, no matter what you work on, whether it's internal or not, don't just describe the work that you do by technical jargon, right? Describe it by the value that it's bringing to people, to your coworkers, or to the consumers that are using it. And I think you'll find that people are able to connect and relate to that a lot more. And it lets you have some good conversations about it. So back to Lumen. One of the interesting things about Lumen is that Netflix has lots and lots and lots of different data sources. And you can connect Lumen to any of them. So maybe you have some data in Elasticsearch, or maybe some in a system that we have called Atlas, or maybe in Jira, or maybe in Bitbucket, Git repos. And all of these and many more can all be plugged into Lumen. In fact, we can even plug into systems like our lunch menus to figure out if we're having veggie burgers for lunch that day. And that's pretty cool. It makes it for a fun project, but it also brings up some interesting challenges, right? This is one of the requirements of the system. We have to be able to support all of these new and existing data sources that we have. But how do we actually support that? How could we support any data source? Most web apps, actually most applications in general, have a very defined set, maybe one or a couple data sources that they talk to, a simple set of APIs. And that's pretty easy to deal with, right? You know exactly what the format of your data you're getting back is in, you know how to deal with it, you know where it's going to be used in your app, but that's not the case here. And so we actually get to do some interesting things that a lot of folks don't do, like use web workers. Web workers allow us to offload a lot of that work from the main thread and into separate threads in the browser. And this is great because when we're dealing with backend APIs that we have no control over, they might be slow, they might be returning gigantic payloads, or they might just throw a bunch of errors. And if all of that work were to happen on the main thread, it would lead to a pretty inconsistent and, in many cases, terrible user experience. But because we push it into worker threads, we can actually enable the user interface to continue working. Even if stuff happens, we can isolate it and kind of minimize that blast zone. It's not to say we never have errors. We definitely have errors, but it's much more manageable. And so this is an architecture, a diagram of that architecture of how it actually fits into the app. It's not super important. You can take a look at it later. But basically, it just says, hey, we're separating this stuff out. And this is a pattern that you don't see in most modern web apps, at least most of the ones that I've worked on. And you can find out a lot more about this and the patterns that we use if you check out this talk that I gave at JS Congress a few months ago called Weaving Webs of Workers. You can find the slides at this noticed URL. Unfortunately, the video for it has not been posted yet, but it should be out sometime within the next few weeks, hopefully. They've been slowly releasing the videos. But that's not the only interesting problem we have, right? There are more interesting, unique things that kind of come up, such as how do we visualize any of that data? Right? If you don't know the format that the data is coming back in, how can you consistently visualize it? Whether it's just in a simple table, or as a line chart, or a bar chart, or a geographical map, we need to find a consistent pattern in order to render that data. And so we actually have to let users define a way to transform the data they're getting from their API into something that Lumen can then use and render. So because of that, we get to do something that most JavaScript engineers would say is evil. And we use mapper functions. Mapper functions are just simple JavaScript functions, but we say that they're evil because we use eval to evaluate them on the client. So I have many thoughts. There are a lot of articles out there that say you should never, ever, ever use eval. I think never is a very strong word to use in any sort of software engineering context. But if you want to know more about that, come and talk to me afterwards. We could have some lively discussions. But the whole point of this is, by just simply addressing our users' needs, we've come up with some fun and interesting challenges that we've had to solve and account for. Our team, we're primarily just in the business of providing powerful tools for other engineers to then build on top of and be successful with. So in our case, we had to support a myriad of data sources, and so we found a way to do that for them. This is important not just to the users, but to our company, right? This becomes a critical part of ensuring Netflix's operations continue to operate smoothly. And so, in simply addressing those unique cases, we've come up with some fun engineering challenges. And I've seen this across every product that I've ever worked on. And that is, if you actually sit down, talk with your customers, understand their needs, you get to build interesting and cool and unique things that you probably won't find in other places. So, with all those ideas in the back of your mind, how does this actually affect your day or my day-to-day job? Well, there's not really that many ways, but they do differ in some ways. Most important is you work directly with your customers. I mentioned this earlier, and I say that this is honestly for better or worse. Sometimes this is really, really awesome. Someone comes to you with a weird, complicated bug, and you could just walk over to their desk and be like, hey, let's reproduce that together and debug it right here. You don't have to have them send you a bunch of information over email or like open up their dev tools and try running some commands. You can just sit down and pair program with them. And that's awesome. It lets you move really fast. You can also ping users on Slack. If they have something, a request for a new feature, you can be like, hey, I implemented that. Let's test it out real quick. And then they can give you quick feedback. You can't do that with most consumer products. And so, in short, this whole development to feedback cycle is really fast, which lets you move quickly, which is great. But it also means that the opposite is also true. Feedback to development also usually needs to be quick. Your users will come and ping you and be like, hey, I need this fixed. And if you don't necessarily deliver it on their time frame, then they might ping you again. They might walk over to your desk and be like, hey, wanted to know where this is at. And that can be kind of frustrating sometimes. That said, this is a solvable problem in my opinion. All you need to do is communicate clearly, be transparent about your expectations on when you're going to get work done. And what happens is you build strong relationships with your customers, the people that are using the product you built, and because of that, you get to have a really rewarding relationship in them. And in my opinion, it makes software engineering really fun, right? You not only get the instant gratification of yourself seeing the changes that you're making, but you get to see other people's jobs and days made easier as soon as you push out a fix. It's awesome. The team I work on, we have a really fast, simple deployment for our UIs. They're just served as static assets. And so as soon as we push to a stash repo, a build happens, and then they get deployed. Whole process takes under a couple minutes usually. And so because of that, we have times where users report bugs, and we can fix them and get them out in under 10 minutes. And they'll be like, hey, that was really awesome. Thank you so much. It unblocked me. And so we actually saved them time and the company money because of that. So another way the day-to-day differs is that our users are also less technologically diverse. And what I mean by that is most companies have technology support policies in place, right? Whether that's the specs of the computers that they're using, the internet connections that they're connected to, or the browsers that they're allowed to use. And a lot of times you don't have to support nearly as many devices and computer profiles and all these other facets that make web development honestly quite challenging. And so because of that, the support policies differ for the applications that you build. Usually they're more limited. For instance, in Lumen, we only have to support Chrome, and we generally assume that people have latest high-end hardware and fast internet connections. Granted, that won't be the case everywhere, but at Netflix it's true, and it makes our jobs easier because of that. And so when I say that to a lot of people, they're like, that sounds like freedom. We get to just ship the latest code. We don't even need to use build steps because Chrome always has the latest ES6 or ES Next features, and that's fantastic. And it's true. We get a lot of freedom, both in terms of the technology that we choose, but then also more freedom to experiment, right? We can work closely with users, do those quick experiment cycles, and we can also change the way our team works. Most internal teams are smaller than large consumer-facing product teams, and so we can change our development strategies, how we approach our sprints, how we do our planning. And usually we can do it within a couple weeks. And if we decide we like it, we stick with it. If we don't, we change it back. That's awesome. That type of freedom is really great, and it appeals to a lot of the engineers I talk with. But freedom is not always that way when working on internal tools. So I got a great example from my dad recently, actually. He works at an energy company over on the East Coast and manages a team of some engineers that work on internal tools. And he was bemoaning to me that they were having a really hard time shipping some of the new stuff they were working on. They wanted to use service workers to solve some cool problems. But they have to support back to IE7 because that is the company policy. Yeah, and so sometimes working on internal stuff really stinks if you're in a company where that is the case, where your technologies are pegged to these old enterprise versions of things. Thankfully, though, if you're working at a more modern and smaller company, that usually isn't the case. We also have to be extra careful, though, that we're not breaking users, right? Because if you're developing tools that people need to get their jobs done, to do their jobs effectively, breaking them has a very high impact, right? It's not just you that's being affected, but it's becoming other people in the company, and it's blocking them from getting their work done. And so we have to spend a lot of time being careful, making sure our changes are deployed carefully after lots of testing, or at least able to be reverted and rolled back really quickly and give people a fast path forward. And then the other, I guess, not so freeing aspect of internal product development is, again, your customers are near to you. And so you actually have to make sure that you really understand their needs. Because when you're working on a product that is used by tens of thousands or more, millions of people even, then you can't really understand all of them, right? You're going to have to, in some cases, kind of genericize their concerns. When your target audience, though, is maybe 10, 20, or maybe in our case, like up to 100, 200 engineers, you need to understand their use cases a little more directly, because the worst thing that could happen is that they start to use your product, and they're like, okay, this doesn't do what I need it to do, so we're going to petition the company to move to a different tool. And that's bad, not just for you as someone that developed that tool, but for the company as a whole. Okay, so all of this is to say, the technologies and the development, the actual engineering work that happens, honestly doesn't change a whole lot when you're working on internal tools. What does change is the people that you're working with and the people that you're interacting with. So at this point, we've talked quite a bit about why I think internal products are important, how it might change your day-to-day a little bit, and what an example of them might be. But a question I get from a lot of folks as I talk to them and tell them what my role is at Netflix, they say, how do you measure success in that sort of scenario? Right? It's different from consumer products. It has to be, because consumer products, usually the two metrics we hear people talk about most are growth, how many new users are you getting, and revenue. What is your monetization strategy? How are you making money off of this product? And both of those aren't really the case with internal tools. And so we think about it a bit differently. There are three primary areas that I like to think about when I think about a successful internal product. The first is that it delivers on functionality more so than aesthetics and even usability or user experience in some cases, right? For consumer products, you have to attract new customers. You have to build a usable experience, even if it doesn't necessarily address all of the functional aspects of that problem domain, because you exist in a space where users, if they don't like your product, they have the freedom to go adopt another one. For internal tools, that's usually not the case. Right? Our customers, if Lumen doesn't meet a need that they have, it's not easy for them to say, like, okay, we can just abandon this and go adopt another paid product that we need to use. They don't have choices. But they do have a lot of needs. And so because of that, our users really care about functionality being delivered more than about it looking nice or being really easy to use. So for instance, in Lumen, all of the dashboards are defined by a JSON configuration file. Now JSON, for engineers, probably doesn't seem that intimidating, but it's definitely not as usable as, say, a WYSIWYG or what you see is what you get type editor, where you click on something and add it to the dashboard. Those features are really nice, but our users greatly prefer having the flexibility of manipulating JSON programmatically, or being able to have us add new features that are just a simple flag rather than having to build out this entire new UI around creating and editing them. And so that is a trade-off that we have chosen to make, and it's helped us be successful. Additionally, stability and reliability are by far more important than new features, at least if your tool is on the critical path. So for my team, we have to detect issues with Netflix. And because of that, it becomes really important that our services are reliable, stable, and always available. This isn't to say that consumer products never care about these type of things, but the degree to which they do is a bit different. When I used to work on a large consumer-facing product, there was constant talk about how do we evolve this product? What new features can we add to deliver more value? How can we attract new customers? All stability and reliability questions kind of became the concerns of the quality assurance department and the site reliability engineers. The team I work on now is both smaller and focused on internal stuff. And so because of that, we spend a lot of time discussing stability and reliability. How can we make sure our services are always available for people when they need them? And how can we improve the features that we already have? Not necessarily adding new features, but improving the workflows that people have already gotten used to. And so this is all because for us, not impacting existing workflows is usually, in most cases, far more important than enabling new workflows for our users. And this all kind of brings me to this last point, and that is that our core customer satisfaction is far more important than it is for us to see growth in the adoption of our tools. Right? We're not here to attract a new audience. Our audience has a limited amount that it can grow anyways. We need to satisfy the audience that we currently have, keep them happy. And so, all of that said though, successful internal products usually do see growth. Our team and some of our products, like Lumen, have grown to go far beyond the scope that they were originally intended for. And that is because we made our customers happy. They were like, hey, this is a really great tool. And so when other people from different areas of the business say, hey, we're thinking about building something that might fit in this problem domain, they'd be like, oh, have you looked at Lumen? And it grows by word of mouth. We rarely ever do any marketing. And so that's fantastic, but it's also hard because we don't get as much staffing and resourcing as consumer products do. And so there have been times where we've been like, look, we don't fully support your use case, and so therefore we recommend you don't use our tool. And that's an unfortunate reality of the type of work that we do. So to recap, successful internal products, in my mind, have three primary things that they do. They deliver on the functionality that their users need. They are stable and they are very reliable, and they keep their core customers happy. Pretty simple. Now again, all of these are things that are also used in concerns of consumer products, but the degree and priority to which they're prioritized is a bit different. So all that to say, honestly, the differences aren't really that big. There are certain things that you have to keep in mind, right? Your users are different, your audience is different, and the methodologies that you employ will be a little bit different. But a lot of internal application development is kind of the same as a lot of the bigger projects that you see that are public facing. And so I've said a lot of words tonight about internal products, and I really hope that you just walk away from this considering the possibilities, right? Whether you're just starting in your career or you've been in the field for a long time, think about hey, what internal tools are out there that might be fun and interesting things to work on in the future? Right? There's a lot of possibilities out there, and a lot of developers don't think about those when they're researching their next job or thinking about where they want to be a couple years from now. And ask people about internal things. A lot of companies, even smallish to mid-sized companies, usually have some internal tools that they work on and engineers that are working on those things. Ask engineers about them. Ask them what they work on. Ask them what tools they enjoy working with at their job. So to close this out, I want to mention Atlas. So I mentioned it very briefly before, but Atlas is another system that my team owns. And it's actually open sourced. You can check it out on GitHub. But it's a real-time database to help you, or near real-time database to help you gain operational insights. In short, it allows us to track metrics related to the services at Netflix, which is what allows us to detect problems with your streams and other issues. And I find it really fitting that the team chose to use Atlas as the name, and the logo is Atlas holding the world, because we use it as a platform for all sorts of things. And it's how we have enabled, part of how we have enabled industry-leading reliability for our streaming service. And it's great. We let other people succeed by building on top of that system. So that next time you have issues with your Netflix, which hopefully is not frequently, you can get back to watching your your favorite shows faster, like Tuca and Birdie, which is a fantastic show and you should check it out. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you so much. So I believe we're going to do some Q&A now, but whether you want to ask a question now or if not, feel free to come up to me later or send me a message on Twitter if you want to chat one-on-one a little bit. And as a shameless plug, my team is actually hiring, so if you found any of this interesting, consider applying. All right, questions? So the question is about customer satisfaction. How do we measure it, essentially? The answer is, for our team, a lot of it is qualitative feedback, right? We get a lot of feedback directly from people, whether it's them specifically coming to us and saying, hey, I'm satisfied, like I'm happy with the tool that you've built, or some cases, hey, you need to be better at building this tool, or this tool doesn't do what I want. Both cases are valid. We also track like how many requests for support we're getting for a specific service in our Slack channel, as well as Netflix has a really big part of its culture is focused on feedback. And so like our manager also gets a lot of feedback from other managers. And so that's the primary method we rely on, is vocal input. But then every now and then we also do things like run surveys. We do track metrics about how many people are using the service and look to see growth in things in those areas. And so it's a myriad of approaches. Probably not as rigorous as what you might see on a larger product, but part of that is purely because our sample size is much smaller, right. And so it's harder to get necessarily like really valuable quantitative input.
So I know that with like internal tools, it sounds like a lot of it is very like reactive, right? Someone comes to you, they say they have a problem, and you kind of try to work on it. But are there any like proactive elements that are involved in the process here, like things that as a team you come up anticipating problems or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, I would say for a lot of internal teams, the default mode is to be kind of reactive. And I think that actually has more to do with the fact that a lot of internal teams at every company I've been at are kind of understaffed. Part of that has to do with hiring, part of that has to do with budgets and a myriad of other factors. But there are definitely lots of proactive things that we do. We keep a pulse on what other folks are doing within the company, trying to see what bigger projects are coming up that might impact our services, and make plans accordingly. We also keep an eye on just general trends of how people are using our services. For instance, in Lumen, we started to notice it was originally built as a pretty static dashboarding system with one type of data source. We're like, okay, that's all people need. And it has evolved over the course of 8 or 9 years now to be this very dynamic thing. And we have an increasing amount of highly dynamic, highly custom use cases that keep coming up. And so we've seen like, okay, this is a direction that the company wants to move in. We're getting more and more requests for it. And so we have actually made plans to try to get ahead of that and make sure that we are developing and heading in a trajectory that is going to address those concerns before they start coming up in the future.
You mentioned a good way to find out about internal tools is talking to the engineers, but if you aren't lucky enough to be able to talk to the engineers in a company, how would you recommend finding a place that would have a good internal tools environment that we otherwise might not have access or knowledge of?
That's a good question. It's hard. I would say for some companies, like take a look at, hopefully they have some sort of blog or some other presence where they kind of write and share about some of their technical stuff. I would say in general though, if you can't find like public talks that they've given or blog posts or engineers to reach out to, then they probably don't have a super great developed tech culture. There are some exceptions to that. For instance, Apple, right? Apple is notoriously like closed off, but I'm sure they have some really fantastic engineering teams within. But by and large, I would say go seek out developers, right? If there's a company that you're interested in, chances are they probably have some engineer on Twitter that you can go and DM. Or feel free to send people messages on LinkedIn. I have people do that to me pretty frequently, and I'm more than open to questions at any point in time about Netflix or web development or pretty much anything else that I'm actually interested in.
Have you had the opportunity to see one of those internal tools, to be sold to your competition, to become a product and then being offered to other companies that it will make it?
So the question is basically, have we seen people take those internal tools and then turn them into businesses? Yes, that has definitely happened. In fact, there are the service that I just mentioned before the end of this talk, Atlas, has actually some companies that have sprung up and basically do consulting just around that. And so that is definitely a thing that happens. Usually there aren't hard feelings, but it kind of depends on how you go about it.
So I know that there's a history of internal tools kind of becoming open source. The one that's coming to mind is Kubernetes at
Okay.
Google. And I know that you have a history of working with open source products. What is the impetus for a company to make an internal tool open source?
That is a good question, and one that is honestly pretty debated. People have different views on what it means to open source something and what the value that you're looking to get out of it is. Because keep in mind, right, most companies do not open source stuff because they're altruistic. There's usually something that is motivating them and they feel will be a good return on their investment. And that falls into a bunch of different buckets, right? Some stuff, for instance, really helps with recruiting, right? You look at Facebook, for instance, open source React and a whole bunch of other JavaScript stuff. They probably do not have any problems finding competent React engineers anymore. And so that's really great for them. They don't have to learn a custom proprietary framework. But then there are other tools where it's really about building ecosystems and communities and trying to get value that way, right? For instance, at Netflix, we use a system called Spinnaker to help with a lot of our deployment pipelines. And we actually developed that in conjunction with Google as well as several other companies. And the goal is to get other companies on board and investing in it, because then it takes off some of the load from what we do. Granted, there is some additional investment we have to make in actually open sourcing and keeping stuff in the open source space, but there are some returns that we're expecting. And so there are other reasons that you could get into as well, especially if you try to monetize the stuff that you open source and all that. But I think those are the two biggest ones that I've seen companies use. Any other questions?
So, are there any internal tools that you use to check the status health or the reliability of the main internal tools? Like, how do you get notified if there's a problem with the data of lumen, for example?
So it depends. A lot of it, though, is dog fooding. Like a lot of the stuff that we use for the external services and monitoring those, we also use for the internal services. Now, there are definitely cases where things go down and we don't detect it. And usually what happens in those cases, though, is we have a post-mortem and we see what gaps do we need to fill in order to actually fix that and so it doesn't happen again. As with any company, like Netflix is not perfect. If anyone could ever be perfectly available with their services, that would be fantastic. But I don't think we'll ever get there. And so the point is learning from your mistakes, right? And being able to adapt to those. But to answer your actual question, by and large, we try to use the same stuff that we use for all of our external services on the internal services.
What would you say is like a typical day for you in terms of the percentage of your time on different projects, different concern areas? I thought maybe you could speak a little bit more about that.
Sure. I will say this. It varies very widely across the company. A lot of teams are set up differently. But for me, my day-to-day, most of it, probably 95% of my time is spent on Lumen or Lumen-related stuff. That is my primary focus. That is what I am the product owner of. There are several smaller projects that I also work on. But by and large, most of my day is that one product. And I would say probably 50% of my time is actually coding. The other 50% does not go to meetings, thankfully, but is usually talking with users, understanding problems that they're having, trying to get a better grasp of how they're using the product and stuff like that I mentioned during the talk.
Yeah, so early on you showed a very large graph of many services.
Yep.
How do these tools figure out which services exactly at fault or which group of services is at fault in such a wide network?
So trying not to go too much into the weeds, but basically it's just nodes, all the deployed services, like they have different nodes that they're deployed to in AWS. Also, by the way, in case anyone didn't know, Netflix is pretty much all in AWS in the cloud. And so those all get metrics that are tagged with unique IDs. And so that helps us kind of narrow it down. Common thing that you might see is like looking at a specific region, like, okay, this is deployed in US East 1, which is like a standard region in AWS, and then drill down to find a specific cluster and then a specific node within that cluster and so forth. And so that's the type of analysis that you can do in Lumen. We have ways for you to filter down the data and the queries that you're making. So.
Do you foresee Lumen becoming open source at any point?
So when we wrote the blog post back in like November or whenever it was, that was definitely the first question that came up, and also like the second, third, and fourth question that came up. I would love to open source it at some point. It is not currently on the roadmap just because there's a lot of other things that we want to improve and change about it. But hopefully in the future. I can't guarantee though.
First of all, could you send my condolences to your father for having to use Internet Explorer? But are there any tools that you dislike using but have to use out of necessity because there's no other choice to do?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, every now and then when I need to make a change to our backend, I have to use IntelliJ and write some Java. That's unfortunate. I just forget how much slower it is. Like, we don't even have a local build for Lumen, and so like it's just save a file, reload the browser, and it works. It's fantastic. Other than that, not really. I'm pretty happy with our environment setup currently. My team very much focuses on keeping things very lightweight so we can move fast, recover quickly, things like that. There are some other parts of the company that have a bit of a different methodology, and so I could see me being frustrated in those cases, but as is, I like most of our tools.
Yeah, this is by far the coolest internal things presentation that I've seen in the industry for a while. So my question is, now AWS is always releasing new functionality and new features. How do you guys keep up with that?
So we have a bunch of different teams that kind of deal with AWS, and I think one of the things is I can't speak 100%, but my perception is, in talking with other engineers, is that they're very much like they use stuff as they need to. If there's a huge functionality where they could immediately see value from it, they try to adopt it. But otherwise, right, I don't think we necessarily support everything that AWS offers right out of the box. We do also work with AWS, though, in kind of the other way to push them to go in a certain direction and try to help them think about ways in which they could expand their product offering. And so in those cases, sometimes we wind up being testers for stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
How do you prioritize like the internal tools that you would like work on? And then what does it
Good questions. So the first question about prioritizing. It depends on the situation, but honestly, most of it just comes down to judgment and understanding the impact of what a certain task is, right? So if someone comes to us and is like, so recent example, for instance, our core SRE team was trying to do a practice failover, evacuating all the traffic out of one region into another. Important, relatively routine, they do them pretty frequently, but we had accidentally deployed a bug to Lumen, and they were like, hey, Lumen is down, we're trying to do this exercise, and it's completely impeding us. And so it's like, okay, obviously that is like a drop everything, go fix that right now type issue. Other times though, someone comes to you and says, hey, I really need this thing, can you do it right now? But then you poke a little further and you're like, okay, this is non-business critical, like no one's actually waiting for this, and it can wait a little longer. In those cases, you just have to make a judgment call and be like, okay, do we have other priorities that need to be delivered sooner, or should we wait and kind of just tell them, hey, we'll get to this soon, but we can't do it right now. And so that's part of the thing that we actually look for when we hire new engineers is, can you make those decisions on your own and make those judgment calls about how to prioritize your work? So second question was, what exactly does a UI engineer do? That is a great question, and another one that kind of varies depending on where you're at in the company. If you're in the actual like UI engineering org, which does a lot of our consumer-facing UIs, it's a lot more kind of doing JavaScript development and HTML and CSS and working with designers and product managers to evolve the existing product. And I think that's kind of the mental model that most people have when they think of UI engineers. UI engineers on the internal side of things, though, tend to be a bit different. Myself, for instance, and the other UI engineers on our team, we have to basically serve three roles, and that is we do the UI engineering development, but then we also have to be product managers for the products that we own, as well as designers for any new features that we're designing. There are some exceptions to that. There are some teams that have dedicated like design support, but not our team. And so I find that's really exciting. I love getting to embrace all those different facets of developing a product and not just doing, the coding side. But again, it varies from team to team.
So does one of your roles include like requirements management? Is that what you do specifically? Like managing the product requirements internally?
Yes and no. So I would say a large chunk of it falls to me. But it is also something that my manager is a little bit involved in. My engineering manager, does a lot of interfacing with other engineering managers and understanding the needs of their teams and stuff like that. And so they can sometimes help provide context as to what requirements and what use cases need to actually be fulfilled by the tool.
Do you work with business analysts at all?
Occasionally. That is not the primary demographic for us. We have other tools like Tableau, which are more frequently used for like the biz ops side of the business.
What's the tech stack like of Lumen, like the libraries, the frameworks, stuff like that?
So Lumen is written with Polymer 2 from Google. So it uses Polymer, but honestly, by and large, it's mostly vanilla JavaScript and web components and things like that. So I find that really fun to work on. But tech stacks throughout the company vary widely. Within my team, just my team, we have stuff also written in Angular 1, Angular 4, React, and then some stuff that is just straight up vanilla JavaScript, as well as Polymer 3 now, so it varies.